The designer heel came down hard on the photograph, grinding the smiling face of Sergeant Thomas Jenkins into the wet pavement. Patricia Whitmore didn't just step on it. She twisted her foot, deliberately, watching the elderly black woman's face crumble as the last image of her deceased husband tore beneath expensive leather. "That's what I think of your sob story," Patricia hissed, her perfectly manicured hand shoving Rosa Mae Jenkins backward. "Now get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." Rosa's knees hit the cold concrete, her arthritic hands scrambling to gather the ruined photograph, the scattered pills, the purple heart metal rolling toward the storm drain. 72 years old, diabetic, homeless, and now watching her husband's memory literally destroyed under a stranger's shoe. Before we continue with Dorothy's story, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Stay with us until the very end to see how this unfolds. And comment below what city you're watching from so we can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. Dorothy Washington had been standing in the same spot for 1 hour and 17 minutes. She knew because she'd been watching the ornate grandfather clock in the corner of the Fifth Avenue penthouse, its golden hands mocking her with each passing second. Her son Marcus had bought that clock at an auction for $75,000. The number still made her dizzy. She'd raised him on $7 an hour. The silver tray in her hands held 12 Baccarat crystal champagne flutes, each filled precisely 3/4 full with Dom Perignon. Vanessa had been very specific about that. 3/4, not half, not full. Exactly 3/4, because that's what they did at the Kennedy compound, and Vanessa Sterling always did things the way the Kennedys did them. Dorothy's shoulders burned, the kind of burn that started deep in the socket and radiated down through her arms like fire through dry wood. Her fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago, but she didn't dare adjust her grip. The last time she'd shifted the tray even slightly, Vanessa had made that sound. That clicking of her tongue against her teeth, sharp and dismissive, the way you'd scold a dog for begging at the table. "Dorothy, darling," Vanessa had said then, not looking up from her phone. "If you can't manage something so simple, perhaps you should sit down. Over there, where the help usually waits." The help. Dorothy had swallowed that word like a stone. Across the room, Vanessa reclined on the cream-colored Italian leather sofa that Marcus had imported from Milan. Her designer heels lay abandoned on the floor, red soles up like a taunt. Her phone glowed in her perfectly manicured hand. Those nails painted the exact shade of Russian red the Sun magazine had declared essential for fall. She laughed at something on the screen, her head thrown back, her long dark hair cascading over the cushions. She hadn't looked at Dorothy in 43 minutes. The guests milled about, their conversations floating through the air like expensive perfume. Stock options, vacation homes in Aspen, the new chef at that impossible-to-book restaurant in Tribeca. They held their own champagne flutes with casual elegance, sipping and setting them down on marble coasters whenever they pleased. No one had taken a glass from Dorothy's tray in over 30 minutes. "Vanessa," Dorothy said softly. Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible over the smooth jazz playing through the hidden speakers. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Vanessa, dear." "Nothing." Vanessa's thumb scrolled lazily across her screen. "Vanessa," Dorothy said louder, hating the pleading edge that crept into her voice. "My arms are tired." Vanessa's scrolling paused. For a moment, Dorothy felt a flutter of hope. But Vanessa didn't look up. She simply sighed, the kind of exaggerated sigh that communicated profound inconvenience, and continued scrolling. Dorothy's hands trembled. The glasses clinked together softly, and the sound might as well have been a gunshot in the quiet room. Several guests glanced over. Dorothy felt her face flush hot with shame. "I don't want to drop anything," Dorothy continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. "May I please put the tray down? Just for a moment?" Vanessa finally looked up. Her dark eyes traveled slowly from Dorothy's face down to the tray, then back up again. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Already?" Vanessa said, her voice light but laced with something sharp. "Dorothy, the party's barely started. The guests haven't even finished their first drinks." "I understand, but I just need to rest my arms for—" "You insisted on helping," Vanessa interrupted smoothly. She set her phone down on the cushion beside her and sat up slightly, as if preparing to deliver an important lesson. "When Marcus told you that we had staff for this sort of thing, you said you wanted to contribute. You said you wanted to be part of our world. Remember?" Dorothy did remember. She'd said those words 3 days ago, sitting in this same living room while Vanessa planned the engagement party. But what Vanessa was describing wasn't what Dorothy had meant at all. She'd meant helping with planning, maybe arranging flowers or addressing invitations. She'd meant being included, being part of her son's new life. "I did say that," Dorothy admitted quietly. "But I thought, the thing is," Vanessa continued, standing now and walking toward Dorothy with slow, deliberate steps, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. "If you're going to be part of this family, you need to understand how things work. This isn't Brooklyn anymore, Dorothy. This is a different world, a world with different expectations." Dorothy felt each word like a slap. Brooklyn. The way Vanessa said it, the borough where Dorothy had raised Marcus, became something dirty, something to be ashamed of. "I'm not from Brooklyn," one of the guests, a woman in a black cocktail dress, whispered to her companion. "Thank God." They laughed softly, and Dorothy wanted to disappear. "I'm just tired," Dorothy said, and she hated how weak she sounded, how defeated. "Please, Vanessa, I can't hold this much longer." Vanessa was standing directly in front of her now, close enough that Dorothy could smell her perfume, something French and expensive that Marcus had probably bought her. Something that cost more than Dorothy's monthly rent used to be. "You're being dramatic," Vanessa said flatly. She reached out and tapped one of the champagne flutes with her fingernail, making it ring like a tiny bell. "Stand up straight. You're slouching, and it's making everyone uncomfortable." Dorothy tried to straighten her spine, but the movement sent a sharp pain shooting through her lower back. She'd been standing in the same position for so long that her muscles had locked up. A small sound escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a whimper. "Are you seriously going to make a scene right now?" Vanessa's voice dropped lower, meant only for Dorothy's ears, but somehow more cruel for its intimacy. "In front of all these people? In Marcus's home?" Marcus's home. Not our home. Not even the home. Marcus's home. As if Dorothy were just a visitor. An inconvenient guest who didn't know when to leave. Dorothy bit down hard on her lower lip, tasting blood. She would not cry. She would not give Vanessa that satisfaction. But her arms felt like they were being pulled from their sockets. "I raised him," Dorothy said suddenly, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I raised Marcus. I worked 3 jobs so he could go to private school. And he's very grateful, I'm sure," Vanessa cut her off, her voice still low but razor sharp. "But that was then, Dorothy. This is now. And right now, you're standing in a room full of very important people, holding a tray and complaining about it. How do you think that looks?" Dorothy's vision blurred with tears. One escaped and rolled down her cheek, and she couldn't even wipe it away because her hands were locked around the tray. Across the room, Patricia Vanderberg shifted in her seat. She was 72, old enough to recognize suffering when she saw it. Old enough to remember when society meant something more than designer labels and Instagram posts. She watched Dorothy's hands shake and felt something twist in her chest. "Richard," Patricia whispered to her husband, tugging his sleeve. "That woman needs help." Richard Vanderberg glanced over, his face tightening. "Stay out of it, Patricia." "But she's clearly—" I said stay out of it. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. That's Marcus Washington's mother, his fiancée. Their business. We're guests here. We're witnesses, Patricia said quietly, but she didn't stand up. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But Richard's hand was on her arm now, holding her in place, and she was too much a product of her own upbringing to make a scene. So she sat there, watching, her champagne turning sour in her mouth. Dorothy saw the exchange, saw the flicker of hope die in Mrs. Vanderburg's eyes as she settled back into her seat. Another potential savior, another person who chose comfort over courage. I just want to put it down, Dorothy whispered to Vanessa. Please. Vanessa stepped back, her expression hardening. Fine, she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. If you can't handle something so simple, then maybe you shouldn't have insisted on being here in the first place. The room went silent. Even the jazz seemed to fade into the background. Every face turned toward them, some curious, some uncomfortable, all watching. Dorothy felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. Her hands shook harder, and the champagne in the glasses began to slosh dangerously close to the rims. Careful, Vanessa snapped. Do you have any idea how expensive those glasses are? Each one costs $300. That's $3,600 you're holding, Dorothy. $3,600. The numbers hit Dorothy like punches. $3,600. She'd worked an entire year at the laundromat to make that much. An entire year of burning her hands on hot steam, of breathing in detergent fumes until her lungs ached, of standing on concrete floors until her feet swelled so badly she had to cut the sides out of her shoes. I'm sorry, Dorothy whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't replace Baccarat crystal, Vanessa said coldly. She turned to address the room, playing to her audience now. You all understand, don't you? Standards have to be maintained. If we let things slide, where does it end? A few guests nodded uncertainly. Others looked away. Patricia Vanderburg felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back and took another sip of champagne she didn't want. Dorothy remembered something then, a conversation from last week that she'd tried to forget. She'd been in Marcus's study, waiting for him to finish a call, when Vanessa had walked in. She hadn't seen Dorothy sitting in the corner chair. Vanessa had been on her phone, laughing with someone. No, she's still here, Vanessa had said, her voice light and casual. I know, right? But don't worry, I'm working on it. By the wedding, she'll understand her place. Marcus is so busy with work, he barely notices what's happening at home anyway. It's perfect. Dorothy had sat frozen, not breathing, as Vanessa continued. She actually thinks she's going to live here permanently. Can you imagine? I've already been looking at some very nice assisted living facilities, the kind with activities and bingo nights. She'll love it. And Marcus will agree because he trusts me to handle family matters. The memory made Dorothy's hands shake harder. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This wasn't Vanessa being stressed about the party. This was calculated. This was deliberate. This was a woman showing Dorothy exactly what her future held. Another tear fell. Then another. Dorothy couldn't stop them now. One of the champagne flutes tilted slightly, and the small stream of golden liquid spilled over the rim and onto the tray. It pooled there for a moment, before dripping onto the marble floor with a soft pat, pat, pat. Vanessa's eyes flashed. You're dripping on the marble. Do you know what that does to the finish? I can't. Dorothy's voice broke. I can't hold it anymore. Then you should have said something earlier, Vanessa hissed. Not now. Not in front of everyone. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing Marcus. You're embarrassing me. A young man near the window pulled out his phone. The movement was subtle, but Dorothy caught it. He angled the camera toward her, thumb hovering over the screen. Recording? Taking photos? She couldn't tell. But the idea that her humiliation might be captured, shared, turned into entertainment made her stomach heave. "Put that away," Vanessa said sharply to the young man, noticing him too. "This is a private event, Jason. No phones." Jason slipped his phone back into his pocket, but not before Dorothy saw him smirk. The damage was done. Even if he hadn't recorded anything, the threat lingered. In this world Vanessa inhabited, everything was performance. Everything was currency. And Dorothy's suffering was just another story to tell at the next party. Dorothy's shoulders began to shake. Not just from the weight of the tray, but from something deeper. From the weight of every sacrifice she'd made. Every night she'd gone to bed hungry so Marcus could eat. Every dream she'd deferred so he could achieve his. She'd given him everything, and now she stood in his penthouse, being treated like she was nothing. She thought about Marcus at 8 years old, coming home from school, crying because the other kids had made fun of his worn-out shoes. She'd held him and promised him that one day he'd have better shoes, better everything. She'd worked a double shift that night and bought him new sneakers with money she'd been saving for her own medication. She thought about Marcus at 15, getting accepted to a prestigious private school on scholarship, but needing money for books and supplies. She'd taken on a third job, cleaning offices from midnight to 6 in the morning, just to make sure he had everything the other students had. She thought about Marcus at 22, graduating top of his class, turning to her in the audience and mouthing, "I love you, Mom," while tears streamed down his face. Where was that Marcus now? Where was the boy who'd promised her that when he made it big, she'd never have to work again, never have to worry, never have to bow to anyone? "Please," Dorothy said one more time, and the word came out as a sob. Vanessa turned away from her, walking back toward the sofa. "Honestly, Dorothy, you're being ridiculous. It's a tray. Just hold it." Just hold it. As if it were that simple. As if Dorothy's 68-year-old arms weren't screaming. As if her arthritic fingers weren't cramping so badly she could feel them curling inward like claws. Dorothy looked around the room desperately, searching for a friendly face, someone who might help her. But the guests had all turned away, suddenly fascinated by their own conversations, their own phones, their own champagne. No one met her eyes. She was invisible. Worse than invisible. She was an inconvenience they were all choosing to ignore. Dorothy's left hand slipped slightly on the tray's handle, and she had to grip harder to compensate. The movement sent a bolt of pain shooting up her arm so intense that black spots appeared in her vision. She swayed on her feet, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might faint. "Steady," she whispered to herself. "Steady, Dorothy. Just a little longer. Marcus will be home soon. Marcus will fix this." But even as she thought it, doubt crept in. Would Marcus fix it? Marcus, who'd been so busy with his business deals that he'd barely been home in weeks. Marcus, who'd seemed so happy when Vanessa agreed to marry him, who'd barely noticed how Vanessa had slowly started excluding Dorothy from family dinners, from conversations, from decisions about the wedding. Dorothy remembered another conversation, just 2 weeks ago. She'd been trying to tell Marcus about a doctor's appointment she needed help getting to, and he'd been on his laptop, barely listening. "Mom, can this wait?" he'd said, not looking up. "I've got a major presentation tomorrow. It's just that my arthritis has been getting worse, and the doctor wants to run some tests. Vanessa can help you with that stuff," Marcus had said, still typing. "She's better at scheduling things anyway. Right, babe?" Vanessa had smiled from across the room. "Of course, darling. Dorothy, we'll take care of it." But Vanessa never scheduled the appointment. And when Dorothy brought it up again, Vanessa had looked at her with that same cold smile and said, "Oh, I thought you were handling that yourself. You're perfectly capable of making your own appointments, aren't you?" Marcus had been in the room, but he'd been on another call, and he hadn't heard. Or he'd heard and hadn't registered it. Either way, Dorothy had ended up taking 2 buses to get to the doctor's office herself, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the pole on the bus. Another drop of champagne fell from the tray, then another. The puddle on the floor was growing, spreading across the white marble like a stain. "For God's sake," Vanessa muttered from the sofa. "Someone get her a towel or something before she ruins the floor." But no one moved. The guests continued their conversations, their laughter, their casual indifference. Patricia Vanderberg stared into her champagne glass, willing herself to be anywhere else. Jason checked his watch. Someone near the bar asked the bartender for a refill. Dorothy's right knee began to buckle. She locked it, forcing it straight, but the effort made her whole leg tremble. The tray tilted dangerously to one side. "Don't you dare drop that," Vanessa called out sharply. Dorothy jerked the tray back to level, and the champagne sloshed violently. 2 glasses clinked together hard enough that Dorothy was certain one would shatter. Somehow, miraculously, they didn't, but the sound echoed through the room like a warning bell. "This is absurd," a man in a navy suit muttered to his wife. "Why doesn't someone just take the damn tray from her?" His wife shushed him. "Don't get involved, Thomas. You know how Vanessa is." Thomas fell silent, but his jaw tightened. He looked at Dorothy, then at Vanessa, then back at his champagne. He took a long drink and turned away. Dorothy thought about setting the tray down anyway, just putting it on the floor and walking out. But where would she go? This was Marcus's home. Her apartment in Brooklyn was gone, sublet when Marcus insisted she stay with him until the wedding, until Vanessa became family, and Dorothy became, what? A burden? An embarrassment? "I raised him," Dorothy whispered to herself, the words a prayer now. "I raised him right. I raised him to be kind." But kindness seemed very far away in this cold, beautiful room. Vanessa's phone rang, a bright chirping sound that cut through the tension. She answered immediately, her voice transforming into something warm and gracious. "Marcus, darling. Yes, the party's going wonderfully. Everyone's here." "Mm-hmm. What? Oh, you're on your way? How soon?" Dorothy's heart leaped. Marcus was coming home. He'd see this. He'd see what Vanessa was doing. He'd make it stop. "Another hour?" Vanessa continued, and Dorothy's hope deflated like a punctured balloon. "Oh, that's fine. We'll manage." "Yes, she's here. Your mother." "Mm-hmm. She's been very helpful." The way Vanessa said helpful made Dorothy's stomach turn. The word was wrapped in mockery, in condescension, in barely concealed contempt. "All right, darling. See you soon. Love you too." Vanessa ended the call and smiled at the room. "Marcus sends his regards. He'll be here in about an hour. Something about a conference call that ran late." An hour. Dorothy had to hold this tray for another hour. She couldn't. She physically could not. Her arms were giving out. Her hands were numb. Her back was screaming. Her knees were shaking. "Vanessa," Dorothy tried one more time, her voice breaking completely now. "Please, I'm begging you." "My arms are fine," Vanessa finished for her, standing up and walking over again. She leaned in close enough that only Dorothy could hear her next words. "You want to know the truth, Dorothy? This is a test, to see if you can handle being part of this family. And right now, you're failing. Badly." Dorothy's breath caught. "A test? Everything is a test," Vanessa whispered. "How you dress, how you speak, how you handle discomfort. Marcus needs a mother who elevates him, not one who embarrasses him. And standing here, crying, complaining about holding a simple tray, that's embarrassing." "I'm his mother," Dorothy said, her voice shaking. "I don't need to pass your tests." Vanessa's smile was sharp as a knife. "Oh, Dorothy, that's where you're wrong. You absolutely do. Because in about 6 months, I'll be his wife, which means I'll be the woman he listens to, the woman he trusts, the woman who decides what's best for our family. She paused, letting the words sink in. You're not competing with me, Dorothy. You already lost. You just don't know it yet. The cruelty of it, the calculated viciousness, hit Dorothy like a physical blow. This wasn't about the tray. This wasn't about the party. This was about power, about Vanessa establishing dominance, showing Dorothy exactly who would control Marcus's life going forward. The tears were flowing freely now, dropping onto the tray and mixing with the spilled champagne. Dorothy didn't even care anymore who saw. Let them see. Let them all see what Vanessa Sterling really was. But they didn't see, or they saw and didn't care. Either way, Dorothy stood alone in a room full of people, invisible in her suffering. Vanessa straightened up, speaking loudly now for everyone to hear. You know what, Dorothy? I think we need to have a serious conversation after the party about realistic expectations, about what you can and cannot handle, about what's appropriate for someone your age. Someone your age. The phrase hung in the air like a slap. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Patricia Vanderberg closed her eyes, unable to watch anymore. Dorothy's arms dropped an inch. Just an inch, but it was enough. The tray tilted sharply, and this time one of the champagne flutes slid across the silver surface and tumbled to the floor. The sound of shattering crystal seemed impossibly loud. The room froze. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every head turned. Dorothy stared at the broken glass on the floor, at the puddle of champagne spreading across the white marble, and felt something inside her shatter too. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. My hands, I couldn't." Vanessa was on her feet instantly, her face twisted with fury. "You dropped it! After everything I said, you actually dropped it!" "My hands gave out," Dorothy sobbed. "I couldn't hold it. I tried. I swear I tried." "Tried?" Vanessa's voice rose. "You dropped a $300 crystal champagne flute because you couldn't do one simple thing I asked you to do?" "It was an accident," Dorothy pleaded. "Please, I'll pay for it." With what?" Vanessa laughed, sharp and cutting. "Your Social Security check? Please. Do you have any idea what you've done? That glass was part of a set. A complete set. You can't just replace one glass. You have to replace the entire set. All 12. That's $3,600, Dorothy. $3,600 because you couldn't hold a tray." The cruelty of it, the casual dismissal of Dorothy's entire life, of everything she'd worked for, was too much. Dorothy felt her knees start to give way. "I worked for everything I have," Dorothy said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected, fueled by something between rage and desperation. "I may not have money like you, but I worked. I worked hard. I gave my son everything. Everything I had, everything I was, I gave it to him." "And he's grateful," Vanessa shot back. "But gratitude doesn't make you qualified to serve at a society function. Look at you. You're crying all over the place. You've broken expensive crystal. You're making my guests uncomfortable. This is exactly why I've been telling Marcus that you need better boundaries." Better boundaries. There it was again. That phrase Dorothy had heard whispered in phone calls, mentioned in conversations Vanessa thought Dorothy couldn't hear. "Better boundaries," Dorothy repeated quietly. "You mean you want me gone?" Vanessa's eyes flashed, but she didn't deny it. "I mean, I want what's best for Marcus. And Dorothy, I hate to say this, but you're making that very difficult. You can't keep up with this lifestyle. You can't handle the expectations. And instead of accepting that gracefully, you're clinging to him, making him feel guilty, making everything harder than it needs to be." "He's my son," Dorothy said, her voice breaking. "And he's my fiancé," Vanessa countered. And soon, he'll be my husband, which means I need to protect our family, our home, our life together. And Dorothy, I'm sorry, but you're not helping. You're hindering. The remaining 11 glasses on the tray began to shake as Dorothy's whole body trembled. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't stand here and take this. She couldn't. The front door opened. The sound of it, that heavy click of the lock disengaging, echoed through the penthouse like a bell. Every head turned toward the entrance. Conversations died mid-word. Even Vanessa went still. Marcus Washington stepped inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. His suit was slightly rumpled from a long day of meetings, his tie loosened, his briefcase in one hand. He looked tired, exhausted. The kind of tired that came from closing billion-dollar deals and managing hundreds of employees and carrying the weight of an empire on his shoulders. But then his eyes found his mother, and everything changed. Marcus saw Dorothy standing in the middle of his living room, tears streaming down her face, her entire body shaking, holding a tray of champagne glasses like she was being tortured. He saw the broken glass on the floor, the spilled champagne spreading across the marble. He saw the guests, all dressed in their expensive clothes, all watching with varying degrees of discomfort and fascination. And he saw Vanessa, standing close to his mother, with fury written across her face. Something in Marcus's expression went absolutely cold. It was a look Dorothy had never seen before. A look that made her think of the stories she'd read about him in business magazines, about how ruthless he could be, how he'd destroyed competitors who'd tried to cheat him, how people in boardrooms feared his anger more than anything. "Mom?" His voice came out low and dangerous, the calm before a storm. At the sound of her son's voice, Dorothy's last shred of strength gave out. The tray fell from her hands, and the remaining 11 glasses crashed to the floor in an explosion of crystal and champagne. The sound was deafening in the silent room. Dorothy collapsed to her knees, glass crunching beneath her, her hands flying up to cover her face, her whole body convulsing with sobs. "I'm sorry," she cried. "Marcus, baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't be angry with me. Please." I tried to hold it. I tried so hard. But my hands gave out, and I couldn't. "I'm so sorry about the glasses. I'll pay for them. I promise. But Marcus wasn't looking at the broken glass. He wasn't looking at the champagne soaking into the carpet. He was looking at his mother, kneeling on the floor like she was begging for forgiveness. And the coldness in his expression deepened into something that made several guests take an involuntary step back. He dropped his briefcase. It hit the floor with a thud that made people jump. He crossed the room in 4 long strides, glass crunching under his Italian shoes, and dropped to his knees beside his mother. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle now, but still carrying that dangerous edge. "Mom, look at me." Dorothy couldn't. She kept her face covered, kept sobbing, kept apologizing. "Look at me," Marcus repeated, and this time he carefully took her hands and pulled them away from her face. What he saw made his jaw clench so tight, Dorothy could hear his teeth grind. Her hands were swollen and red, the knuckles white from gripping the tray so hard for so long. Her wrists had deep marks where the tray's handles had bitten into her skin. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably, and when Marcus touched them gently, she flinched in pain. "Who did this to you?" Marcus asked quietly. The quiet was worse than shouting. Dorothy had raised Marcus. She knew his quiet voice. It was the voice he used when he was truly, deeply angry. The voice that came before storms. "It was an accident," Dorothy gasped through her tears. "The glasses. I'll pay for them. I'll work it off somehow. I don't care about the glasses." Marcus's hands were gentle as he examined her wrists, turning them over carefully, his face growing darker with each red mark he found. "Who did this to you? Who made you stand here holding a tray until your hands looked like this?" Dorothy's eyes darted to Vanessa, then back to Marcus. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. How could she tell him? How could she explain what the past hour had been like without sounding weak, without sounding like she was trying to come between him and the woman he loved? Marcus followed her gaze. He looked at Vanessa, who stood frozen near the sofa, her face pale. He looked at the guests, all suddenly very interested in their shoes. He looked at Patricia Vanderberg, who had tears running down her face. "Someone better start talking," Marcus said, his voice still quiet, but carrying across the room like thunder. "Right now." The alarm on Marcus's phone screamed at 6 a.m. He'd been awake for 2 hours already, sitting in his home office with 3 laptops open and his phone on speaker with his head attorney, David Chen. "The investigator's name is Sharon Fletcher," David said, his voice crackling through the speaker. "She's been with APS for 23 years, known for being thorough, skeptical, and completely immune to charm or money." "Good," Marcus said, typing rapidly. "I don't want someone we can buy off. I want someone who'll see the truth." "The truth is you met Rosa yesterday and immediately offered her a $60,000 job. To someone like Fletcher, that's going to look suspicious as hell. Then we make it look less suspicious. How fast can you draft an employment contract?" "I already did. Sent it to your email 10 minutes ago." "But Marcus, listen to me. Patricia Whitmore doesn't file complaints she can't win. She's got something, some angle we're not seeing." Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "Find out what it is. I want to know every connection she has to APS, to the city, to anyone who matters. I want to know what favors she's called in, and what promises she's made. That'll take time. You have 3 hours. Fletcher arrives at 9. David sighed. "You're asking for a miracle. You're a lawyer. Miracles are in the job description." Marcus ended the call and stood, his joints cracking from hours of sitting. He walked to the window overlooking his property. Dawn was breaking, pale gray light filtering through the trees. In the staff quarters, he could see a light on in Rosa's apartment. She was awake too. He wondered if she'd slept at all. A knock on his office door pulled him from his thoughts. Carmen entered, carrying a tray with coffee and something that smelled like cinnamon. "You need to eat," she said, setting the tray on his desk. "And before you say you're not hungry, I'm not asking." Marcus smiled, despite the tension. "Yes, ma'am." "Rosa is awake. I saw her light on when I came in." "I know. Should I check on her?" "Not yet. Let her have some peace while she can. In 3 hours, this house is going to be chaos." Carmen nodded, then hesitated at the door. "Mr. Davidson, that woman, Patricia Whitmore. I know her type. My mother worked for a woman like that in Mexico City. Rich, cruel, always needing to prove she was better than everyone around her. Women like that, they don't stop. They escalate." "I'm counting on it," Marcus said quietly. "Because the more she escalates, the more she reveals who she really is, and I want the whole world to see it." At 7:15 a.m., Rosa stood in her small bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was almost unrecognizable from the one who'd begged at Patricia's door yesterday. Clean hair, combed and pinned back. Clean clothes, a simple blue blouse and black slacks that Carmen had brought her last night. Reading glasses perched on her nose, borrowed from Carmen because Rosa's had broken 2 weeks ago. She looked professional, competent, like someone who could run a foundation. She looked like a lie. Rosa's hands gripped the edge of the sink. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "You've survived worse. You've buried a husband. You've lost everything. You can handle one investigator." But her hands shook anyway. A soft knock on her apartment door made her jump. She opened it to find Marcus standing there, 2 coffee cups in his hands. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her one. Fair warning, it's strong. Carmen says I make it like battery acid, but I figure today, we need the extra voltage. Rosa took the cup, grateful for something to do with her trembling hands. What time is the investigator coming? 9 o'clock. We have an hour and 45 minutes to prepare. Prepare how? I don't know what to say. I don't know how to convince someone that this is real when I barely believe it myself. Marcus stepped inside her apartment, closing the door behind him. Then don't try to convince her. Just tell the truth. You needed help. I offered a job. You accepted. That's not exploitation. That's employment. In 24 hours? To a homeless woman you'd never met? Rosa's voice rose slightly. Mr. Davidson, I appreciate everything you've done, but even I know how this looks. It looks like I saw someone in need, and I helped them. And you know what? I don't care if that makes me look naive or stupid or like I'm being scammed, because I know the truth. You know the truth. And the truth is, you're exactly what this foundation needs. I don't even know what the foundation does yet. Then let's fix that. Marcus pulled out his phone, opening a document. For the next hour, I'm going to brief you on everything. The mission, the structure, the budget, your specific role. By the time Fletcher gets here, you're going to know this foundation better than I do. You're going to be able to answer every question she throws at you, and you're going to do it with the confidence of someone who earned this position. Rosa stared at him. Why are you doing this? I told you last night. No, I mean right now. Why are you standing in my apartment at 7 in the morning, preparing me for an interrogation, when you could just let me go? Tell the investigator it was all a misunderstanding. Send me on my way with a check and some kind words. Why are you fighting? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough. Because when I was 12 years old, I watched my mother stand in front of a social worker who was convinced she was unfit to raise me. I watched that social worker look at our shelter address, look at my mother's calloused hands and her second-hand clothes, and decide, without ever asking a single real question, that we were a problem to be solved. They tried to put me in foster care, tried to separate us. What happened? Mrs. Chen happened. She showed up at that hearing with employment records, with a lease agreement for the apartment above her restaurant, with proof that my mother had a job and a home and a future. She fought for us when we couldn't fight for ourselves. Marcus looked directly at Rosa. So yeah, I'm fighting. Because that's what you do for people who deserve it. And you deserve it, Rosa. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back hard. Okay. Teach me about this foundation. Make me worthy of this fight. For the next 90 minutes, Marcus talked, and Rosa absorbed everything like a sponge. The foundation would focus on 3 areas: transitional housing for homeless veterans' families, job placement services, and mental health support. The initial budget was $5 million. Rosa's role as Director of Outreach would involve connecting with families in need, coordinating with local shelters and VA hospitals, and serving as the public face of the initiative. Why me as the public face? Rosa asked. Why not you? Because I'm a billionaire. When I talk about homelessness, people see charity. When you talk about it, they see reality. You've lived it. You understand it in a way I never will. That authenticity, that's what's going to make this foundation actually work, instead of just being another rich guy's tax write-off. At 8:45 a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the front gate. Marcus watched it on his security monitor. A woman in her 50s stepped out, wearing a gray pantsuit and carrying a leather briefcase. Her expression was set in the kind of professional neutrality that Marcus recognized immediately. The look of someone who'd seen every scam, every sob story, every manipulation, and trusted none of it. Sharon Fletcher had arrived. Marcus opened the front door before she could knock. Miss Fletcher, thank you for coming. I'm Marcus Davidson. Mr. Davidson. Her handshake was firm, perfunctory. I appreciate your cooperation. This shouldn't take long if everyone's forthcoming. Of course. Please, come in. Marcus led her to his sitting room, where Rosa was already waiting, seated in an armchair, with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Carmen had positioned her perfectly, not on the couch where she'd look small and vulnerable, but in the armchair where she appeared composed and professional. Ms. Fletcher, this is Rosa May Jenkins, Marcus said. The woman at the center of your investigation. Fletcher's eyes swept over Rosa, taking in every detail. Rosa felt the assessment like a physical thing, cataloging her borrowed clothes, her nervous hands, the fear she was trying desperately to hide. Mrs. Jenkins, Fletcher said, her voice carefully neutral. I'd like to speak with you privately, if that's all right. Of course, Rosa said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Marcus started to leave, but Fletcher stopped him. Actually, Mr. Davidson, I'd like you to stay. I'll speak with Mrs. Jenkins first, then you, then both of you together. I find people's stories get more interesting when they have to keep them straight in front of each other. Marcus sat in the chair opposite Rosa. Fletcher remained standing, pulling a digital recorder from her briefcase. I'm going to record this conversation, Fletcher said. Standard procedure. Mrs. Jenkins, can you tell me in your own words how you came to be living in Mr. Davidson's home? Rosa took a breath. I was homeless. I'd been evicted from my apartment 3 days earlier. I was going door to door in this neighborhood, offering to work in exchange for a place to stay. Most people said no. One woman, Patricia Whitmore, she didn't just say no. She destroyed my belongings and threatened to call the police. What did she destroy? A photograph. The last picture I had of my late husband. And what happened next? I was walking away from her house when I collapsed. Low blood sugar, I'm diabetic, and I'd lost my medication. Mr. Davidson caught me before I hit the ground. He brought me inside, gave me food and juice, and when I was stable, he offered me a job. Fletcher's expression didn't change. What kind of job? Director of Outreach for his Veterans Family Foundation. He's launching it to help people like me, widows of veterans who fall through the cracks after their husbands die. And what are your qualifications for this position? The question hung in the air like a blade. Rosa felt the weight of it, the implication that she had none, that she was a charity case being given a fake job. But then she thought of Thomas, of 40 years in a factory, of 2 tours in Vietnam, of dying with dignity, even when the world tried to strip it away. My qualifications, Rosa said slowly, are 35 years as a nursing assistant. My qualifications are being married to a veteran for 43 years and watching the VA system fail him over and over again. My qualifications are knowing exactly what it feels like to do everything right and still end up on the street. My qualifications are being able to look families in the eye and say, I understand, and actually mean it. She leaned forward slightly. Ms. Fletcher, I don't have a college degree. I don't have experience running a foundation. But I have something more valuable. I have the trust of people who've been where I am. When I walk into a shelter or a VA hospital and I tell someone there's help available, they're going to believe me because they'll see themselves in me, and that's worth more than any credential. For the first time, something flickered in Fletcher's eyes. Not quite approval, but interest. Mr. Davidson, Fletcher said, turning to him. Why her? Of all the qualified candidates you could hire, why a woman you met yesterday? Because qualified candidates don't understand the problem. They study it. They analyze it. They create programs based on data and best practices. And all of that is important, but it's not enough. Marcus gestured to Rosa. She doesn't need to study the problem. She is the problem, or was, until yesterday. And that lived experience is irreplaceable. So this is charity. No, this is smart hiring. I'm paying her $60,000 a year because she's worth it. Because the foundation will succeed or fail based on whether we can actually reach the people who need us. And Rosa can reach them in a way no one else can. Fletcher wrote something in her notebook. Mrs. Jenkins, do you feel pressured to accept this position? No. Do you feel you owe Mr. Davidson something in exchange for helping you? Rosa hesitated. This was the trap. If she said yes, it looked like exploitation. If she said no, it looked like she didn't appreciate what he'd done. I feel grateful, Rosa said finally. But gratitude isn't debt. He offered me a job. I accepted it. That's a transaction, not a rescue. And if the job doesn't work out, if you're fired or you quit, where will you go? Another trap. If Rosa had nowhere else to go, it proved she was dependent, vulnerable to exploitation. I'll figure it out, Rosa said. Same as I was figuring it out before I met Mr. Davidson. I've survived worse than job loss, Mrs. Fletcher. I'll survive whatever comes next. Fletcher studied her for a long moment. Then she closed her notebook. I'm going to be honest with you both, she said. I came here expecting to find an elderly woman being taken advantage of by a wealthy man with a savior complex. What I'm finding instead is more complicated. Complicated how? Marcus asked. Mrs. Jenkins, you're clearly intelligent and capable, but you're also clearly traumatized. You've experienced significant loss and hardship in a very short period of time. That makes you vulnerable, whether you want to admit it or not. Rosa's jaw tightened. Vulnerable doesn't mean incapable. I agree, but it does mean I need to ensure this arrangement is in your best interest, not just Mr. Davidson's. Fletcher turned to Marcus. I need to see employment contracts, job descriptions, salary documentation, insurance policies. Everything that proves this is a legitimate position and not just a cover for charity. I have all of that, Marcus said. My attorney prepared it this morning. This morning? Fletcher's eyebrow rose. How convenient. No, how prepared. I knew you were coming. I knew you'd need proof, so I made sure you'd have it. Fletcher's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression shifted, just slightly, but enough that Marcus noticed. Excuse me, she said, stepping into the hallway to take the call. Rosa looked at Marcus, panic in her eyes. She doesn't believe us. She's doing her job. Just stay calm. They could hear Fletcher's voice through the door, too quiet to make out words, but the tone was sharp, professional. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. When she returned, her face was carefully blank. That was my supervisor, Fletcher said. Apparently, I'm not the only one taking an interest in this case. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means Patricia Whitmore has friends in high places. Friends who are making calls. Friends who want this investigation to result in a specific outcome. Rosa's heart sank. Of course Patricia had connections. Of course she was already using them. But Fletcher wasn't finished. Which is exactly why I'm going to conduct this investigation by the book. No favors, no shortcuts, no predetermined conclusions. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Davidson, I'm going to need to see those documents, and I'm going to need to interview your staff, tour the premises, and verify every claim you've made. If this is legitimate, you'll have nothing to hide. If it's not, I'll know. Take all the time you need, Marcus said. For the next 90 minutes, Fletcher combed through every detail. She read the employment contract line by line. She interviewed Carmen, who confirmed that Rosa had her own apartment and wasn't being coerced. She toured the staff quarters, inspecting Rosa's living space. She even called the foundation's registered address to verify it existed. And through it all, Rosa sat in the sitting room, waiting, her stomach churning with anxiety. Finally, at 11:30 a.m., Fletcher returned to the sitting room where Marcus and Rosa waited. "I've completed my preliminary investigation," Fletcher said, "and I'm prepared to make a recommendation to my supervisor." Rosa held her breath. "Based on what I've seen today, I find no evidence of exploitation or coercion. Mrs. Jenkins appears to be a willing participant in a legitimate employment arrangement. The living conditions are appropriate. The salary is fair. The job description is specific and achievable." Rosa felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "However," Fletcher continued, and Rosa's hope crashed, "I'm concerned about the speed of this arrangement. Mrs. Jenkins, you went from homeless to employed in less than 24 hours. That's unusual, and unusual arrangements warrant closer scrutiny." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "It means I'm going to recommend a 60-day probationary review. I'll check in monthly to ensure Mrs. Jenkins is adjusting well, that she's receiving appropriate support, and that the employment relationship remains professional and appropriate. If at any point I have concerns, I'll intervene. Is that acceptable?" "Yes," Rosa said immediately. "Yes, that's acceptable." Fletcher nodded. "Then I'll file my report today. You should receive official notification within 48 hours. She packed her briefcase, preparing to leave. But at the door, she paused and looked back at Rosa. "Mrs. Jenkins, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen every kind of exploitation, every kind of abuse. And I've also seen genuine kindness, though it's rarer than it should be. I don't know yet which category this falls into, but I hope, genuinely hope, that it's the latter. You deserve a break. I just need to make sure that's actually what this is." "Thank you," Rosa said quietly, "for being thorough, for caring enough to check." After Fletcher left, Rosa and Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. Then Rosa started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that she couldn't quite control. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." "We survived round 1, Marcus corrected. "But Patricia's not done. Whatever calls she was making, whoever she was talking to, that was just the opening move." As if on cue, Marcus's phone rang. David Chen's name flashed on the screen. "Tell me you have something," Marcus said, putting the phone on speaker. "I have something. You're not going to like it." David's voice was grim. Patricia Whitmore serves on the board of 3 major charities in Atlanta. She's also a major donor to the mayor's re-election campaign. And get this, her husband's law firm represents half the city council. So she has leverage. She has an army, and she's already deploying it. I just got a call from a reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Someone leaked a story about you rescuing a homeless woman and immediately hiring her for a cushy 6-figure job. The salary is $60,000, not 6 figures. The article says $120,000. It also says you have a history of impulsive decisions and that you're currently under investigation for elder exploitation. Rosa's face went pale. They're lying. Of course they're lying, but lies make better headlines than truth. The story runs tomorrow morning, unless we can kill it. Marcus stood, pacing. Can we? Not kill it, but we can get ahead of it. I've already contacted your PR team. They're drafting a statement. But Marcus, you need to decide how public you want to go with this. Because once that article runs, you're not just fighting Patricia Whitmore, you're fighting public opinion. Rosa stood as well, her legs shaky, but her voice firm. Then we fight public. Both men looked at her. Mrs. Jenkins, David started. Rosa. My name is Rosa, and if they're going to print lies about me, then I want to tell the truth. I want people to know what Patricia Whitmore did. I want them to know what it's like to be invisible until someone decides you're a problem to be removed. I want them to know that homeless people are human beings who deserve dignity, not just pity or contempt. Marcus studied her face.
Are you sure? Because once we do this, there's no taking it back. Your story becomes public. Your pain becomes public. People will judge you, criticize you, dissect every choice you've made.
Let them, Rosa said. I have nothing left to be ashamed of. Patricia Whitmore tried to destroy me because she thought I was too weak to fight back. Let's show her exactly how wrong she was. Marcus smiled, a fierce, proud smile. Then we go to war. David, set up a press conference for tomorrow morning. Before that article runs, we tell our side of the story. Are you insane? David sputtered. You're a tech billionaire. You don't do press conferences about personal disputes. I do when those disputes matter. This isn't personal, David. This is about how we treat people who need help. And I'm not going to let Patricia Whitmore turn compassion into a scandal. Marcus ended the call and turned to Rosa. Last chance to back out. Rosa thought of Thomas's smile in that photograph, thought of his voice saying, "Stand tall, baby. We don't bow to bullies." I'm not backing out, she said. I'm standing up. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning at Marcus's company headquarters downtown. Rosa spent the entire night before alternating between terror and determination, practicing answers to questions she imagined reporters would ask. Carmen sat with her until past midnight, brewing tea and offering quiet encouragement.
What if I freeze? Rosa asked for the 10th time. What if I get up there and can't speak?
Then Mr. Davidson will speak for you, Carmen said. But you won't freeze. I've seen you face down that terrible woman, Patricia. You'll face down some reporters just fine. But Rosa wasn't convinced. Reporters weren't Patricia. They were professional questioners, trained to find weak spots and exploit them. And Rosa had so many weak spots. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, Rosa pulled out the torn pieces of Thomas's photograph. She'd taped them together as best she could, the seams visible but holding. His smile was fractured, but still there. I need you, baby, she whispered. I need your strength. Tell me I can do this. The photograph didn't answer, but in her mind, she heard Thomas's voice anyway. The same words he'd spoken before every difficult thing they'd faced together. You're tougher than you think. You always have been. At 7 a.m., a black town car arrived to drive Rosa and Marcus downtown. Rosa wore a navy dress that Carmen had helped her pick out, simple and dignified. Marcus wore one of his usual suits, but Rosa noticed his tie was different. Not his typical silk designer piece, but a plain cotton tie that looked older, worn. That was my father's, Marcus said, catching her looking. Only thing of his I kept. He wore it to every job interview, every important meeting. Said it reminded him where he came from. Does it work? We're about to find out. The drive downtown took 30 minutes through morning traffic. Rosa watched the city pass outside the window. People rushing to work, stopping for coffee, living their ordinary lives. None of them knew that in 3 hours, her face might be on the news. Her story might be dissected over breakfast tables across Atlanta. The thought made her stomach turn. Marcus's company occupied 15 floors of a glass tower in the business district. The town car pulled into an underground garage where David Chen was waiting, holding a tablet and looking like he hadn't slept either. Good, you're early, David said. We need to go over a few things before we head upstairs. The conference room is already packed with reporters. I counted at least 30 cameras. 30? Rosa felt her knees go weak. Local news, cable news, even a crew from CNN. This story is bigger than we anticipated. David looked at Marcus. Are you absolutely sure about this? We can still cancel. Issue a written statement instead. No, Marcus said firmly. Rosa deserves to tell her story in her own words, not filtered through a press release. David sighed and turned to Rosa. Mrs. Jenkins, I need you to understand something. These reporters aren't your friends. They're going to ask uncomfortable questions. They're going to try to catch you in contradictions. Some of them are going to be openly hostile because Patricia Whitmore has already gotten to them. I understand. Do you? Because once you walk into that room, everything changes. Your privacy is gone. Your past will be investigated. People will form opinions about you based on 30 seconds of footage. Are you ready for that? Rosa thought about the past 3 days. Sleeping on benches, begging for food, being shoved to the ground by Patricia Whitmore, having her husband's photograph destroyed under a designer heel. I've already lost my privacy, Rosa said quietly. I've already been judged. At least this time, I get to speak for myself. David looked at Marcus, who nodded. All right then, let's go. They took an elevator to the 15th floor. The doors opened onto a lobby where Rosa could hear the low rumble of voices from the conference room beyond. Her heart hammered so hard, she thought it might burst through her chest. Marcus touched her shoulder gently. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Why? Rosa met his eyes. Because somewhere in this city, there's another woman like me. Alone. Scared. Invisible. And when she sees me on TV today, I want her to know she's not alone. That someone sees her. That she matters. Marcus smiled. Then let's make sure she hears you. The conference room doors opened, and Rosa was hit with a wall of light and noise. Cameras clicked and flashed. Reporters shouted questions over each other. The room was packed beyond capacity, people standing along the walls, crowding into every available space. Marcus led Rosa to a table at the front where 2 microphones waited. She sat down, her hands shaking so badly she had to clasp them in her lap. Marcus sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. David stepped to the microphones first. Thank you all for coming. Mr. Davidson will make a brief statement, then Mrs. Jenkins will speak, and then we'll take questions. Please hold all questions until the end. He stepped aside, and Marcus leaned forward. 2 days ago, I witnessed an act of cruelty that I couldn't ignore. An elderly woman was being verbally assaulted and physically intimidated by a neighbor who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience to be removed. That woman was Rosa May Jenkins, widow of Vietnam War veteran Thomas Jenkins. She had been homeless for 3 days after being evicted from her apartment following her husband's death from cancer. The room was silent now, every camera focused on Marcus. I offered Mrs. Jenkins a position as Director of Outreach for my new Veterans Family Foundation. Not out of pity, but because she is uniquely qualified for the role. She understands the struggles of military families because she lived them. She understands the failures of our support systems because she experienced them. And she understands dignity in the face of hardship because she's maintained hers even when the world tried to strip it away. He paused, letting the words sink in. Yesterday, the woman who assaulted Mrs. Jenkins filed a complaint with Adult Protective Services, claiming I was exploiting a vulnerable elderly woman. That complaint was investigated and found to be without merit. But the damage was done. A false story is being prepared for publication, claiming I'm running some kind of scam. So we're here today to tell the truth before lies have a chance to take root. Marcus turned to Rosa. Mrs. Jenkins, would you like to speak? Rosa's throat was dry. Her hands still shook. But she leaned toward the microphone anyway. My name is Rosa May Jenkins. I'm 72 years old. I was married to Thomas Jenkins for 43 years. He was a good man, a veteran, a factory worker, a husband who loved me, even when loving me meant sacrificing everything. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. When Thomas got sick, We did what so many families do. We went bankrupt trying to save him. We sold our house, our car, everything we owned. And when he died, I had nothing left except a photograph and his Purple Heart. 2 days ago, I tried to trade those items for food. The woman I approached didn't just say no. She destroyed my photograph. She called me pathetic.
She kicked me when I tried to gather my belongings.
Rosa heard gasps from the reporters. Good. Let them be shocked. Then Mr. Davidson appeared. He didn't just help me. He gave me a purpose. He offered me a job doing something that matters, helping families like mine. And now the woman who destroyed my husband's photograph is trying to destroy this opportunity too. She's calling it exploitation. I call it employment. She's calling me a victim. I call myself a survivor. Rosa looked directly into the nearest camera. I'm not a charity case. I'm not being taken advantage of. I'm a woman who lost everything and found someone willing to give me a chance to rebuild. If that's a crime, then we've lost our humanity. She sat back, her heart racing, and the room erupted. Every reporter shouted at once, hands raised, voices overlapping. David pointed to a woman in the front row. Yes, Sarah from Channel 5. Mrs. Jenkins, how do you respond to allegations that you're being paid an inflated salary for a position that doesn't actually exist? The salary is $60,000, not the $120,000 being reported. And the position exists. I've spent the last 2 days learning every detail of this foundation. I can tell you our budget, our mission, our target demographics. This is real work, not pretend. Another reporter, a man with gray hair. Mr. Davidson, isn't it true you have a history of impulsive business decisions? How do we know this isn't another one? You're right, I do make fast decisions. In business, speed matters. But this wasn't impulsive, this was necessary. When you see someone drowning, you don't schedule a meeting to discuss rescue options. You throw them a lifeline. A younger woman near the back. Mrs. Jenkins, Patricia Whitmore's attorney has released a statement saying you're mentally unstable due to grief and trauma. How do you respond? Rosa felt the words like a slap. Mentally unstable. The oldest weapon used against women who refuse to stay quiet. I respond by saying that grief doesn't make you unstable. It makes you human. I lost my husband. I lost my home. I lost everything that mattered to me. And yes, that hurt. It still hurts. But pain doesn't equal incompetence. Trauma doesn't equal inability. I'm grieving, and I'm capable. Both things can be true. Marcus leaned toward his microphone. And I'd add that the only person showing unstable behavior in this situation is Patricia Whitmore, who physically assaulted an elderly woman over a request for help. Do you plan to press charges against Mrs. Whitmore? Someone shouted. Rosa and Marcus exchanged a glance. They hadn't discussed this. That's up to Mrs. Jenkins, Marcus said. All eyes turned to Rosa. She thought about Patricia's face, twisted with contempt. Thought about her heel on Thomas's photograph. Thought about the cruelty that served no purpose except to make herself feel powerful. No, Rosa said finally. I'm not pressing charges. The room buzzed with surprise. Why not? A reporter demanded. Because Patricia Whitmore is already facing the only punishment that matters. She has to live with being the kind of person who kicks someone when they're down. That's a life sentence I wouldn't wish on anyone. Marcus smiled slightly. That was exactly the right answer. But then a reporter in the back stood up, a man Rosa didn't recognize. Mrs. Jenkins, I'm with the Atlanta Conservative Review. Isn't it true that you were fired from your last nursing job for theft? The room went silent. Rosa felt the blood drain from her face. That's a lie, she said. but her voice wavered. "I have documentation here that says you were terminated from Mercy General Hospital in 2019 for stealing medications from the pharmacy." Marcus shot to his feet. "That's completely false, and you know it. Mrs. Jenkins was never fired from any job. She left Mercy General to care for her dying husband." "Then you won't mind if we verify that?" the reporter smirked. "Verify whatever you want," Marcus snapped. "You'll find nothing, because there's nothing to find." This is exactly the kind of character assassination I was talking about. Patricia Whitmore is feeding lies to anyone who'll print them. David stepped forward. "This press conference is over. Thank you all for coming." But the damage was done. As Rosa and Marcus were escorted out through a side door, she could hear the reporters already on their phones, chasing down the false story about theft. By tonight, it would be everywhere. In the car back to Marcus's house, Rosa sat in stunned silence. Carmen had been right about one thing. She hadn't frozen. But she hadn't been prepared for this either. For blatant lies told with such confidence that people might actually believe them. "They're going to destroy me," she said quietly. "No, they're going to try. There's a difference." Marcus was already on his phone with David. "Get me everything. Employment records, references, medical documentation from when Thomas was sick. I want proof that she left that job voluntarily, and there was never any theft allegation." "I'm on it," David said through the speaker. "But Marcus, this is going to take time. The news cycle moves faster than fact-checking. Then we move faster." They pulled up to Marcus's house to find a nightmare waiting. The street was packed with news vans, reporters camped outside the gate, cameras pointed at every car that entered. "How did they find this address?" Rosa asked, her voice breaking. "Patricia," Marcus said grimly. "She's escalating." Carmen met them at the door, her face pale. "Mr. Davidson, they've been calling the house phone all morning. And someone threw something over the fence. I called the police, but they said it's not technically trespassing." "What did they throw?" Carmen led them to the back patio, where a brick lay on the ground, a note tied around it with string. Marcus picked it up and read it aloud. "Scam artist. We know what you are. Leave Atlanta or we'll make you." Rosa's legs gave out. She sat down hard on one of the patio chairs, her whole body shaking. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I thought I could, but I can't. This is too much." Marcus knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulders. "Look at me, Rosa, look at me." She met his eyes, hers swimming with tears. "You can do this. You are doing this, and we're going to win." "How? They're making up lies. They're threatening me. They're desperate. Don't you see? If Patricia Whitmore had a real case, she wouldn't need to resort to fabricated theft allegations and thrown bricks. She'd go through proper channels. But she can't, because the truth is on our side. The truth doesn't seem to matter much right now. It will. I promise you, it will." Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression shifted. Surprise first, then something like hope. "It's Sharon Fletcher, from APS." He answered on speaker. "Miss Fletcher." "Mr. Davidson, I'm calling because I just watched your press conference, and I want you to know that I've been receiving calls all morning from people with connections to Patricia Whitmore, pressuring me to change my assessment of Mrs. Jenkins's situation." Rosa's heart sank. Of course they were pressuring her. Of course. But Fletcher wasn't finished. "I want you to know that I told every single one of them to go to hell. My assessment stands. Mrs. Jenkins is a competent adult in a legitimate employment situation, and I'm filing a formal complaint against Mrs. Whitmore for abuse of the reporting system." Rosa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're defending us?" "I'm defending the truth, Mrs. Jenkins. I've been in this job long enough to know the difference between exploitation and employment. And I've been in this job long enough to recognize a smear campaign when I see one. Patricia Whitmore isn't concerned about your welfare. She's concerned about her reputation. After Fletcher hung up, Rosa felt a tiny flicker of hope rekindle. They had an ally, a credible, neutral witness who could testify that this arrangement was legitimate. But the hope was short-lived. At 3 p.m., David called with worse news. The Conservative Review just posted their story online. They're running with a theft allegation. They claim they have sources familiar with the situation who confirm you were fired.
Can we sue them? Marcus demanded.
For what? They attributed it to anonymous sources. That's protected. We can demand a retraction once we prove it's false. But the story is already out there. Rosa pulled up the article on Marcus's tablet. The headline made her physically sick. Billionaire's charity case has history of theft, former employer claims. She scrolled through the article, each paragraph worse than the last. Allegations that she'd stolen pain medications, claims from unnamed coworkers that she was unstable and dishonest. A quote from a so-called hospital administrator saying her termination was necessary for patient safety. All lies, every single word. But they were lies that people would believe because they fit a narrative. The desperate woman, the troubled past, the too-good-to-be-true rescue that was obviously a scam. Rosa's phone rang. Her new phone, the one Marcus had given her yesterday. The number was unfamiliar, but local.
Hello?
Rosa Jenkins? A woman's voice, sharp and professional. Yes? This is Amanda Cho from WSB-TV. I'm doing a story on your background, and I wanted to give you a chance to comment on the theft allegations before we air. There are no theft allegations. That story is false. So you deny being fired from Mercy General Hospital? I was never fired. I left to care for my dying husband. Then you won't mind if we contact Mercy General for confirmation? Contact whoever you want. I have nothing to hide. But after Rosa hung up, she turned to Marcus with fear in her eyes. What if someone at the hospital lies? What if Patricia got to them too? Then we fight harder. David, get me Mercy General's HR department on the phone. I want to talk to whoever handles employment verification. While David made calls, Carmen brought Rosa a cup of tea she didn't want and couldn't drink. The hours crawled by. More news vans arrived. More reporters knocked on the gate. Someone started a hashtag on social media, Justice for Rosa, which was touching until Rosa realized it was being used both by supporters and by people convinced she was a con artist. At 7 p.m., Marcus's phone rang again. This time it was someone Rosa didn't expect. His mother. Marcus, I just saw the news. What on earth is happening? Marcus put the call on speaker so Rosa could hear. Mom, it's complicated, but basically, I hired a woman who needed help, and now someone's trying to destroy both of us for it. Is this the Rosa woman they're talking about? The one they're saying stole medications? She didn't steal anything, Mom. That's a lie Patricia Whitmore is spreading. There was a pause. Then Marcus's mother said something that made Rosa's breath catch. Patricia Whitmore. Richard Whitmore's wife? You know her? I know of her, or rather, I know about her husband's law firm. Marcus, when you were 12 and we were living at Mrs. Chen's restaurant, do you remember the lawyer who tried to evict us? The one who claimed Mrs. Chen was violating zoning laws by letting us live there? Vaguely. Why? That lawyer worked for Whitmore and Associates, Richard Whitmore's firm. They represented the landlord who wanted to tear down Mrs. Chen's building to put up condos. They made our lives hell for 6 months, until Mrs. Chen finally proved the eviction was illegal. Rosa sat forward. Are you saying Patricia Whitmore's husband has a history of targeting vulnerable people? I'm saying the Whitmores have a history of making money by removing people they consider undesirable from neighborhoods they want to gentrify. And if Patricia is coming after you, Rosa, it's not just about reputation. It's about property values. She doesn't want homeless people in her neighborhood because it might affect her investment. Marcus looked at Rosa, something fierce lighting in his eyes. Mom, I need to go, but thank you. You just gave us the angle we need. After he hung up, Marcus turned to David. Research the Whitmores. I want to know every property deal they've been involved in, every eviction, every development project. If they have a pattern of targeting vulnerable populations, we expose it. Marcus, that could take weeks. Then we have weeks, but right now we need to survive tonight. Rosa, are you okay? Rosa realized she was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Your mother stood up for me. She doesn't even know me, and she stood up for me. She knows what it's like to be where you are. That's enough. At 10 p.m., the evening news aired. Rosa watched with Marcus and Carmen, prepared for the worst. And the worst is what they got. Every channel led with the story, and most of them ran with the theft angle. Rosa's face was plastered across every screen, identified as either a troubled woman or a con artist, depending on which station you watched. Only one station, WSB-TV, took a different approach. Amanda Cho, the reporter who'd called Rosa earlier, had actually done her job. She'd contacted Mercy General Hospital and gotten a statement from their HR director confirming that Rosa Mae Jenkins had voluntarily resigned in 2019 to provide family care. No theft allegations, no termination for cause, clean employment record. We reached out to the Atlanta Conservative Review for comment on their story, Amanda Cho said on camera. They declined. We also attempted to contact Patricia Whitmore, who is alleged to have been the source for many of the claims against Mrs. Jenkins. She also declined to comment. What we're left with is a troubling pattern of misinformation targeting a vulnerable woman at the most difficult time of her life. Rosa watched the segment in stunned silence. When it ended, she looked at Marcus. She believed me. One reporter believed you. That's a start. Marcus's phone was already ringing again. David. Turn on channel 2, David said, breathless. Right now. They switched channels just in time to see Patricia Whitmore herself on screen, standing in front of her mansion, facing a cluster of reporters. I want to make something very clear, Patricia said, her voice dripping with false concern. My complaint to Adult Protective Services was made out of genuine worry for Mrs. Jenkins's well-being. I witnessed her in distress. I wanted to ensure she was receiving appropriate care, not being exploited by someone with questionable motives. A reporter shouted a question. Mrs. Whitmore, security camera footage shows you physically pushing Mrs. Jenkins and destroying her property. How do you respond? Patricia's face tightened. I have no comment on alleged footage that hasn't been verified. What I will say is that this entire situation has been manufactured by Mr. Davidson to make himself look like a hero. He's using a vulnerable woman as a prop for publicity. So you're denying that you assaulted Mrs. Jenkins? I'm saying the truth will come out, and when it does, people will see Mr. Davidson's supposed charity for what it really is. A publicity stunt by a man desperate for relevance. The interview ended, and Marcus muted the TV. Security camera footage, he said slowly. Rosa, when Patricia destroyed your photograph, where exactly were you standing? At her front gate. Why? Because if she has security cameras, and a house like that definitely has security cameras, then there's footage of everything she did. David's voice came through the phone, excited now. Marcus, if we can get that footage, we can prove she's lying. We can prove she assaulted Rosa. We can end this. Rosa felt hope and dread warring in her chest. How do we get security camera footage from someone who hates us? Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. We don't. We let the police get it. Rosa, are you ready to press charges? Rosa stared at Marcus, her heart pounding. Press charges? Against Patricia Whitmore? Yes, assault, destruction of property, whatever my lawyers can make stick. Marcus was already pacing, his mind clearly racing ahead. The moment you file charges, the police have to investigate, and when they investigate, they can subpoena that security footage. But I said I wouldn't press charges. On TV, in front of everyone. You said that when you thought turning the other cheek was the right move. But Patricia just went on television and called you a liar. She's denying everything she did to you. So now, we don't turn the other cheek. We fight back with facts. David's voice crackled through the phone speaker. Marcus, think this through. If Rosa presses charges and it doesn't stick, it makes her look vindictive, like she's retaliating for the APS complaint. It will stick. I saw what Patricia did. I'm a witness. A witness with a financial interest in defending Rosa. Your testimony will be viewed as biased. Then we get other witnesses. There were neighbors. Someone must have seen something. Rosa stood up, her legs steadier than they'd been all day. Stop. Both of you, just stop for a second. The men fell silent, looking at her. This isn't about revenge, Rosa said quietly. And it's not about making Patricia pay. If we press charges, we do it for one reason only, to get the truth on record, to prove I'm not lying, to prove this whole thing isn't some scam like she's claiming. That's exactly why we need to do it, Marcus said. Then I'll do it, tomorrow morning. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not doing this because I hate Patricia Whitmore. I'm doing this because somewhere out there, another woman is watching this story, and she needs to know that rich people don't get to assault poor people and lie about it afterward. She needs to know the truth matters. Marcus's expression softened. All right. Tomorrow morning, we go to the police station together. We file a formal complaint, and we let the investigation play out. And in the meantime, David asked, the news cycle doesn't stop. That theft story is still out there. People still think Rosa is a con artist. Then we keep pushing back with facts. Get me those employment records from Mercy General, in writing. I want official documentation we can release to the press. And I want a list of every property deal the Whitmores have been involved in for the last 10 years. If they have a pattern of targeting vulnerable people, I want proof. At 11 p.m., after David hung up and Carmen finally convinced them both to eat something, Rosa sat at Marcus's kitchen table, picking at a sandwich she couldn't taste. Her mind kept replaying Patricia's interview, that smooth denial, the fake concern in her voice. She's good at this, Rosa said. At lying. She believes her own story. People like Patricia always do. They rewrite history in their heads, until they're the hero and everyone else is the problem. Marcus pushed his own untouched sandwich aside. But here's the thing about liars. They get comfortable. They think they're untouchable. And that's when they make mistakes. What if she doesn't make mistakes? What if that security footage shows something different than what I remember? What if I'm the one who's wrong? Are you wrong? Rosa closed her eyes, forcing herself to relive that moment. Patricia's hand on her chest, shoving hard. The heel coming down on Thomas's photograph, deliberate and cruel. The Bible kicked across the pavement. No, I'm not wrong. Then we trust that. Tomorrow, we tell the police exactly what happened, and we let the evidence speak for itself. But Rosa couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Downstairs, she could hear Marcus moving around. He couldn't sleep either. Around 2 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. You don't belong here. Leave while you still can. Rosa's hands shook as she screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Marcus. Within 30 seconds, he was knocking on her apartment door. "I'm calling the police right now," he said when she showed him the original message. "This is harassment. This is a threat." "It's just words." "Just words?" Marcus's voice rose.
"Rosa, someone threw a brick at this house today. Someone is texting you threats at 2 in the morning. These aren't just words, they're escalation." He called 911, and within 20 minutes, 2 police officers were at the door taking Rosa's statement. They were professional, polite, but Rosa could see the skepticism in their eyes. Rich neighborhood, expensive house, elderly black woman claiming harassment. She knew what they were thinking, even if they didn't say it. "We'll file a report," the older officer said, writing in his notebook.
"But unless the threats become more specific, or there's actual violence, there's not much we can do." "Someone threw a brick over my fence," Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. "That's trespassing at minimum." "Did you see who threw it?" "No, but—" "Then we can't make an arrest. File charges against someone for trespassing when you can prove who it was." The officer closed his notebook.
"My advice? Get better security. Cameras at the gate, maybe a guard. This neighborhood, you can afford it." After they left, Marcus stood in his foyer, fists clenched. They didn't take it seriously. "No, they didn't," Rosa said. "But they filed a report. That's something. That's documentation." "It's not enough." "It's what we have." At 8 a.m., exhausted and running on coffee and nerves, Rosa and Marcus drove to the Atlanta Police Department's main precinct. David met them there, along with a woman Rosa hadn't met before, a lawyer named Jennifer Park, who specialized in assault cases. "Mrs. Jenkins," Jennifer said, shaking Rosa's hand firmly, "I've reviewed the facts of your case. If what you're telling me is accurate, Patricia Whitmore committed at least 2 crimes, simple assault and criminal trespass to property. The assault charge will be easier to prove if we can get that security footage." "What if she's already deleted it?" Rosa asked. "Then she's destroyed evidence, which is a crime in itself." Either way, filing charges puts her in a difficult position. They went inside and were directed to a Detective Williams, a black woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to Rosa's story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. "So let me make sure I understand," Detective Williams said when Rosa finished. "You went to Mrs. Whitmore's house asking for help. She refused. She shoved you. She destroyed your photograph. She kicked your belongings. And then she filed a complaint against Mr. Davidson here, claiming he was exploiting you?" "That's correct," Rosa said. "And you have a witness to the assault?" "I do," Marcus said. "I saw the end of it. I saw her shove Rosa. I saw the destroyed photograph on the ground." Detective Williams wrote something down, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Jenkins, I need to ask you something directly. Are you filing these charges because you want justice, or because you want revenge for the APS complaint?" Rosa had expected this question. She'd prepared for it. But hearing it out loud still stung. "I'm filing charges because what Patricia Whitmore did was wrong. Because if she did it to me, she's probably done it to others. And because the truth matters more than my pride or my comfort." Something shifted in Detective Williams's expression. "All right. I'll open an investigation, but I need to warn you. Cases like this, where it's your word against a wealthy socialite with connections, they're tough. Even with Mr. Davidson as a witness, a good defense attorney will argue he's biased. We need that security footage to make this stick." "So get a warrant for it," Jennifer Park said. "I'll try. But judges don't always issue warrants for simple assault cases, especially when the alleged victim waited 2 days to file charges." She didn't wait out of choice.
Marcus said. She waited because I convinced her to take the high road. That was my mistake. Detective Williams stood, handing Rosa a card. I'll be in touch. In the meantime, Mrs. Jenkins, stay safe. If you receive any more threats, report them immediately. Don't wait. They left the precinct at 10:30 a.m. As they walked to the car, Rosa's phone buzzed again. Another text, different number. Gold digger, everyone knows what you are. She showed it to Marcus without a word. His jaw clenched. Forward it to Detective Williams, right now.
Marcus, they said there's nothing they can do.
I don't care what they said. We document everything, every text, every threat, every lie. Because when this is over, I want a paper trail a mile long, showing exactly what the Whitmores did. At noon, they returned to Marcus's house to find the media circus had somehow gotten worse. There were twice as many news vans as yesterday, reporters practically climbing over each other for position at the gate. And standing in the middle of it all, giving an interview to CNN, was Patricia Whitmore. That's our house, Marcus said, his voice dangerous. She's on my property. She's on the public sidewalk, David corrected, phone pressed to his ear as he tried to get an update from his investigators. Technically legal. They parked in the garage and entered through a side door, but they could still hear Patricia's voice carrying on the wind, sugary sweet and dripping with false concern. I just want what's best for Rosa. She's clearly been through so much trauma, and I worry that Mr. Davidson is taking advantage of her vulnerable state. I'm calling on him to release her from this employment contract and help her find appropriate care facilities. Marcus slammed his hand against the wall. Appropriate care facilities. She means a nursing home. She wants Rosa locked away where no one can hear her story. Rosa felt something inside her snap. She'd been patient. She'd been dignified. She'd turned the other cheek. And Patricia was still out there, lying to the entire world, trying to erase Rosa like she was nothing. I'm going out there, Rosa said. What? No. Rosa, that's exactly what she wants. She wants you to lose control on camera. Then she's going to be disappointed, because I'm not going to lose control. I'm going to tell the truth. Before Marcus could stop her, Rosa walked out the front door. The moment she appeared, every camera swung toward her. Patricia's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in calculation. Mrs. Jenkins, Patricia called out, her voice loud enough for every microphone to catch. I'm so glad you're here. We can finally have an honest conversation about your well-being. Rosa walked down the driveway toward the gate, her heart hammering but her steps steady. Marcus followed close behind, David practically running to keep up. You want to talk about my well-being? Rosa said, her voice carrying clearly in the cold morning air. Then let's talk about how you destroyed the last photograph I had of my dead husband. Let's talk about how you shoved me to the ground when I asked for help. Let's talk about how you're standing here now, lying to these cameras, because the truth makes you look like exactly what you are. Patricia's smile froze. I never touched you. You're confused, traumatized. You need help, not exploitation. I filed assault charges against you this morning, Rosa said. The police are investigating, and they're going to subpoena your security footage. So you can keep lying to these reporters, but you can't lie to a video recording. The reporters erupted with questions. Patricia's face went pale, then flushed red. You filed charges? Against me? Patricia's voice rose, losing its careful modulation. I was trying to help you. You were trying to make me disappear. Because poor people existing in your neighborhood offends you. Because my pain was inconvenient for your property values. Rosa took a step closer to the gate. But I'm not disappearing. I'm not going quietly. And when that security footage comes out, everyone is going to see exactly who you are. There is no footage, Patricia snapped, then seemed to realize her mistake. I mean, my cameras weren't working that day. Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. Convenient. Your cameras just happened to malfunction on the exact day you assaulted someone?
I didn't assault anyone.
Then prove it. Release your security footage voluntarily. Show everyone what really happened. Patricia's hands clenched into fists. I don't have to prove anything. You're the one making accusations. The burden of proof is on you. Actually, Detective Williams's voice cut through the chaos. The burden of proof is on the state, and I'm here to collect it. Everyone turned to see Detective Williams walking up the sidewalk, another officer beside her, holding an official-looking document. Patricia Whitmore, Detective Williams said. Yes, I have a warrant to seize security camera footage from your residence for the dates of November 18th through November 20th. You need to provide access to your security system immediately. Patricia's face went from red to white. You can't. I have rights. You do, including the right to have your attorney present during the seizure. But the warrant is valid, and you will comply. One of the reporters shouted, Mrs. Whitmore, are you refusing to cooperate with the police? Patricia looked around at the cameras, at the reporters, at the trap she'd walked herself into. If she refused, she looked guilty. If she complied, the footage would prove Rosa right. I want my lawyer, Patricia said finally. Call them, Detective Williams said. We'll wait. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Patricia made frantic phone calls. Her lawyer arrived in a black Mercedes, a sharp-suited man who immediately started arguing about the scope of the warrant. But Detective Williams stood firm, and eventually, Patricia had no choice but to let the police into her house. Rosa watched from Marcus's driveway, surrounded by cameras, as officers emerged from Patricia's mansion carrying hard drives and equipment. The footage existed. It hadn't been deleted. Whatever was on those cameras was about to become public record. Mrs. Jenkins, a reporter called out, how do you feel right now? Rosa thought about the question. How did she feel? Vindicated? Scared? Triumphant? I feel sad, she said honestly. Sad that it had to come to this. Sad that a simple request for help turned into a war. Sad that Patricia Whitmore chose cruelty over kindness and now has to face the consequences. At 4 p.m., Detective Williams called Marcus's phone. He put it on speaker so Rosa could hear. I've reviewed the security footage, Williams said. All of it. And Mrs. Jenkins, I owe you an apology. Rosa's heart stopped. An apology? For doubting you, even for a second, because that footage shows everything exactly as you described it. The shove, the destruction of the photograph, the verbal abuse. It's all there, in high definition, from 3 different camera angles. Rosa's knees went weak. Marcus caught her arm, steadying her. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now I arrest Patricia Whitmore for simple assault and criminal damage to property. The DA will decide about additional charges. But, Mr. Davidson, Mrs. Jenkins, I need you to prepare for this to get worse before it gets better. The Whitmores are connected. They're going to fight this with every resource they have. Let them fight, Rosa said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm not backing down. At 6 p.m., every news station in Atlanta led with the same story. Patricia Whitmore arrested on assault charges. The footage hadn't been released publicly yet. It was evidence in an active case, but the fact of its existence was enough. Reporters who'd been sympathetic to Patricia suddenly pivoted, asking hard questions about why she'd lied, why she'd destroyed evidence of her good character. The Conservative Review quietly took down their article about Rosa's alleged theft. No retraction, no apology, just gone, as if it had never existed. But other outlets picked up the real story. Amanda Cho from WSB-TV did a deep dive into the Whitmores' business history and found exactly what Marcus's mother had suggested. a pattern of pushing poor families out of gentrifying neighborhoods, always through legal channels, always with plausible deniability, but always with the same result: displacement in the name of development.
This isn't just about one assault, Amanda Cho said on the evening news. This is about a systemic pattern of treating vulnerable people as obstacles to be removed, rather than community members to be supported. And Rosa Mae Jenkins decided to say no more. Rosa watched the coverage from Marcus's living room, Carmen beside her, holding her hand, Marcus pacing behind the couch like a caged tiger. "We did it," Carmen said softly. "You stood up to her, and you won." "This isn't winning," Rosa said. "This is just surviving. Winning comes later." Her phone buzzed. Another text, but this time from a number she recognized. Sharon Fletcher from APS. "I saw the news. I'm writing an official commendation for your case file. You're one of the strongest women I've ever met." Rosa showed the text to Marcus. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. "See? I told you the truth would win." But at 8 p.m., the victory felt hollow when Rosa's phone rang with a call from Afghanistan. Michelle, her daughter. "Mom? Mom, what the hell is going on? I'm seeing your face on the news over here. Are you okay?" Rosa's throat closed up. She'd been so focused on fighting Patricia, on surviving each day, that she'd barely thought about how this was affecting Michelle. Her daughter, deployed in a war zone, watching her mother's life fall apart on CNN. "I'm okay, baby. I'm safe." "Safe? Mom, you were homeless. You were assaulted. And I had to find out about it from the news? Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want to worry you. You have enough to deal with." "Enough to deal with? Mom, you're my mother. You're the only family I have left. And you were sleeping on benches and I didn't even know?" Michelle's voice cracked. "How could you not tell me?" "Because you're 8,000 miles away fighting a war, and I didn't want to add to your burden." "I'm coming home. I'm requesting emergency leave. I'll be there in 3 days." "Michelle, no. You can't leave your unit." "Watch me. I already talked to my CO. She approved it. Mom, you don't get to decide this. I'm coming home, and we're going to figure this out together." After they hung up, Rosa sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. Marcus sat beside her, not speaking, just present. "She's coming home," Rosa said finally. "My daughter is coming home." "That's good, isn't it?" "I don't know. She's going to be so angry, so disappointed. She's going to look at me and see a failure. She's going to look at you and see a survivor, because that's what you are, Rosa. You survived poverty. You survived Patricia's cruelty. You survived a media assault. And you're still here, still fighting, still standing. That's not failure. That's heroic." Rosa wanted to believe him, but all she could think about was Michelle's face when she saw her mother living in someone else's house, wearing borrowed clothes, working a job she'd had for 3 days. What kind of mother lets her child come home to this? At 10 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. David. "We have a problem, a big one." "What now?" "Richard Whitmore, Patricia's husband, just filed a defamation lawsuit. Against you, against Rosa, against me, against anyone who's spoken publicly about this case. He's claiming we orchestrated a conspiracy to destroy Patricia's reputation for financial gain." "That's insane." "That's also a $100 million lawsuit with enough legal firepower behind it to bury us in motions for the next 5 years. Marcus looked at Rosa, who'd gone pale. "Let me guess," Marcus said. "We have 48 hours to retract everything we've said, or he pursues the suit." "Try 24 hours. And he's already gotten a friendly judge to issue a gag order. We can't talk to the press about this case until it's resolved." So we're silenced, right when we finally have proof. Effectively, yes. Rosa stood up slowly, her hands shaking, but her voice steady. Then we fight the lawsuit. We don't retract anything. We don't apologize. We let them sue us, and we prove in court that every word we said was true. Rosa, you don't understand how expensive this could be. I understand that the moment we back down, Patricia wins. She gets to rewrite history. She gets to make me disappear. And I will not disappear. Not for her, not for anyone. Marcus ended the call and looked at Rosa with something like awe. You know this could bankrupt both of us, right? Even if we win, the legal fees alone. I've already lost everything once. I can do it again. Can you? Marcus thought about his company, his house, his carefully built empire. Then he thought about his mother at 12 years old, standing in front of a social worker, fighting for her child. He thought about Mrs. Chen, risking her business to help strangers. Yeah, he said, I can. The gag order hit like a sledgehammer at 6 a.m. the next morning. A process server knocked on Marcus's door, handing him legal documents that effectively silenced them until a judge could rule on the defamation case. Rosa stood in the hallway, watching Marcus read through the papers, his jaw getting tighter with each page. They're claiming we damaged Patricia's reputation to the tune of $50 million in lost business opportunities and emotional distress, Marcus said, his voice flat with disbelief. They're saying I manufactured this entire situation to gain publicity for my foundation. Can they do that? Can they just sue us for telling the truth? They can sue us for anything. Winning is different, but the process alone will cost us everything. Marcus set the papers down hard on the table. David warned me. He said the Whitmores would escalate. I just didn't think they'd go nuclear this fast. Carmen appeared with coffee neither of them wanted. Mr. Davidson, there are reporters at the gate again. More than yesterday. They're asking about the lawsuit. Tell them no comment. We're under a gag order. Marcus rubbed his face, exhaustion showing through. This is exactly what they wanted. Silence us right when we finally have proof. Rosa picked up the legal documents, scanning through the dense text. Most of it was incomprehensible lawyer language, but one section caught her eye. Marcus, look at this. They're not just suing us. They're suing Amanda Cho, the reporter who actually investigated their background. They're sending a message. Talk about us, and we'll destroy you. Marcus pulled out his phone. I need to call my legal team. We need to fight this gag order immediately. But before he could dial, his phone rang. The screen showed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Mr. Davidson, this is Judge Patricia Monroe from the Fulton County Superior Court. I'm calling about the defamation case filed against you. Marcus put the phone on speaker. Your Honor, I wasn't expecting. I'm calling because I've reviewed the complaint and the supporting evidence. Mr. Davidson, I'm deeply troubled by what I'm seeing. Rosa's heart sank. A judge calling directly usually meant bad news. The security camera footage that was seized from Patricia Whitmore's residence was submitted to my chambers this morning as part of the criminal case. I've watched it. All of it. Marcus and Rosa exchanged glances. Your Honor, we're under a gag order, Marcus started, which I'm lifting, effective immediately. Judge Monroe's voice was crisp, professional. The gag order was issued by Judge Harrington, who happens to be a close personal friend of Richard Whitmore. That alone is grounds for recusal. But more importantly, I've seen the evidence. This isn't defamation. This is documentation of a crime. The Whitmores are using the legal system to silence victims, and I won't allow it in my jurisdiction. Rosa felt tears spring to her eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet, Mrs. Jenkins. I'm also ordering the security footage released to the media. The public has a right to know what happened. And I'm referring Judge Harrington to the Judicial Ethics Board for issuing an order that clearly violated your First Amendment rights." After the call ended, Marcus just stared at his phone in disbelief. "Did that just happen?" "I think we just got saved by a judge with a conscience," Rosa said, her voice shaking. Within an hour, the security footage was everywhere. Every news station played it on loop. Patricia Whitmore shoving Rosa. Patricia grinding her heel into the photograph. Patricia kicking the Bible across the pavement. The audio was even worse. Patricia's voice dripping with contempt as she called Rosa pathetic, told her to leave, threatened to call the police. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Patricia's social media accounts were flooded with condemnation. Her charity board positions were suspended, pending investigation. Companies she had endorsement deals with dropped her. By noon, the woman who'd been Atlanta's social darling was a pariah. But Patricia wasn't done fighting. At 2 p.m., her lawyer held a press conference. "My client deeply regrets the events of that day," the lawyer said, reading from a prepared statement. "She was having a difficult personal moment and reacted inappropriately. However, she maintains that Mr. Davidson's subsequent actions, immediately hiring Mrs. Jenkins, using her story for publicity, were opportunistic and exploitative. Mrs. Whitmore is prepared to make a public apology and a substantial financial settlement to Mrs. Jenkins if she agrees to terminate her employment with Mr. Davidson." Rosa watched the press conference from Marcus's office, her hands clenched into fists. "She's trying to buy me." "She's trying to separate us," Marcus corrected. "If you take the money and leave, her story becomes, 'I made a mistake but tried to make amends.' If you stay, her story is, 'She chose the billionaire's money over my genuine apology.' There's no genuine apology in what I just heard, just damage control." "So, what do you want to do?" Rosa thought about the question. She thought about Thomas, about dignity, about what it meant to stand for something. Then she picked up her phone and called Amanda Cho directly. "Amanda, it's Rosa Jenkins. I want to do an interview, on camera, today." "Rosa, are you sure? The gag order was lifted an hour ago, and I have things to say." Amanda arrived within 30 minutes, a camera crew in tow. They set up in Marcus's living room while Carmen fussed over Rosa's appearance and Marcus paced nervously in the background. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said for the 10th time. "Yes, I do. Because if I stay silent, Patricia controls the narrative, and I'm done letting her control anything." The interview went live at 4 p.m., streaming on WSB-TV's website and social media platforms. Amanda started with softballs, letting Rosa tell her story from the beginning. But then she got to the hard question. "Mrs. Whitmore's attorney says she's offering you a substantial settlement. Are you going to take it?" Rosa looked directly into the camera. "No." "Can I ask why?" "Because money doesn't erase what she did. Money doesn't change the fact that she saw a human being in need and chose cruelty. Patricia Whitmore isn't sorry she hurt me. She's sorry she got caught. And I won't help her pretend otherwise." "So you're staying with Mr. Davidson? Working for his foundation?" "I'm staying because this job matters. Because helping other veterans' families matters. Because showing the world that homeless people deserve dignity and opportunity matters more than Patricia Whitmore's reputation." There are people who say you're just after Mr. Davidson's money, that you're taking advantage of his generosity. Rosa smiled sadly. Those people have never been where I was 4 days ago. They've never had to choose between pride and survival. They've never had to beg for help from strangers. And they've certainly never had someone destroy the last thing they had of the person they loved most. So their opinions about my motivations don't really matter to me. What does matter? Truth, justice, making sure no one else has to go through what I went through. That's what matters. The interview went viral within minutes. The hashtag Justice for Rosa trended nationally. Messages of support poured in from across the country. But the most meaningful message came at 6 p.m. when Rosa's phone rang with Michelle's number. "Mom, I just landed in Atlanta. I'm at the airport. Where are you?" Rosa's hands shook. "I'm at Marcus Davidson's house, in Buckhead."
I can send you the address.
"I know where it is. I've been watching the news for 3 days straight. I'll be there in 45 minutes. The wait was agonizing. Rosa changed clothes 3 times, unable to decide what to wear. Carmen tried to help, but eventually just hugged her instead. "She's going to love you no matter what," Carmen said. "You're her mother." "I'm her mother who let her find out I was homeless from CNN." "You're her mother who survived. That's what she'll see." When the doorbell rang at 6:47 p.m., Rosa almost couldn't move. Marcus answered the door, and there stood Michelle, tall, strong, in her army fatigues, with Thomas's eyes and Rosa's stubborn jaw. Mother and daughter stared at each other for a long moment. Then Michelle dropped her duffel bag and pulled Rosa into a crushing hug. "Don't you ever hide from me again," Michelle said, her voice breaking. "I don't care how bad things get. You call me. You understand?" "I understand," Rosa sobbed into her daughter's shoulder. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know, Mom. I know." They stood there holding each other, while Marcus quietly excused himself, giving them privacy. When they finally pulled apart, Michelle wiped her eyes and looked around. "So, this is the famous Marcus Davidson's house. The billionaire who rescued my mom and started World War III with Atlanta's elite." "That's one way to put it. The other way is that he saw you when everyone else looked away. That counts for something." Michelle picked up her bag. "Can I stay here, or should I get a hotel?" "There's plenty of room," Marcus called from the hallway, clearly not as far away as he'd pretended to be. "Carmen's already making up the guest room next to your mother's apartment." Over dinner, Carmen's famous chicken enchiladas that even Michelle's military mess hall training couldn't criticize, Rosa watched her daughter interact with Marcus. They circled each other like cautious animals. Michelle, protective and suspicious. Marcus, careful and respectful. "So, what's your endgame here?" Michelle asked Marcus directly. "My mom works for your foundation. You get good publicity. What happens when the publicity fades? What happens to her?" "Then she keeps working." "The foundation isn't a publicity stunt, Sergeant Jenkins. It's a 5-year project with a $50 million budget. Your mother's position is permanent as long as she wants it. And if she wants to leave, then she leaves with a severance package and references. This isn't indentured servitude." Michelle studied him for a long moment. "You really believe in this, don't you? This whole helping people thing." "My mother was where your mother was 26 years ago. Homeless. Desperate. One kind person changed our lives. I'm just paying it forward." "That's a nice story. But what's in it for you?" Marcus set down his fork. "Redemption, maybe. I spent 15 years building a company and a fortune. I have everything I could possibly want materially. But I was empty. Isolated. Your mother showing up on my sidewalk, that wasn't just me saving her. That was her saving me from becoming exactly like Patricia Whitmore, rich, comfortable, and completely disconnected from what actually matters." Michelle's expression softened slightly. "Okay, I can respect that. But if you hurt my mom, then you have my permission to make me regret it. Deal?" "Deal." At 9 p.m., David called with news that made everyone freeze. The DA just announced they're adding charges against Patricia Whitmore. Not just assault. They're going after her for witness intimidation, destruction of evidence, and abuse of the legal system. Apparently, they found emails between Patricia and Judge Harrington discussing the gag order before it was officially filed. She was manipulating the case from the inside. "How much time is she looking at?" Marcus asked. "If they can make everything stick? 2 to 5 years." Rosa closed her eyes. She'd never wanted Patricia in prison. She just wanted the truth acknowledged. "There's more," David continued. "Richard Whitmore's law firm is being investigated for ethics violations. Turns out that gentrification pattern we found? It involves some pretty shady property acquisitions, bribing city officials, forging documents, intimidating residents. The whole firm might go down." "Good," Michelle said firmly. "People like that need to face consequences." But Rosa felt only sadness. She could have just said no, just closed the door and walked away. None of this had to happen. "Yes, it did," Marcus said quietly. "Because people like Patricia don't just say no. They crush, they destroy, they erase, and if we hadn't fought back, she'd have done it to someone else." The next morning, Rosa woke to find Michelle already up, sitting in the living room talking with Marcus about the foundation. They were looking at plans, discussing outreach strategies, debating the best ways to connect with homeless veterans' families. "I have contacts at the VA," Michelle was saying. "People who trust me. I could help you build those bridges." "Are you volunteering?" Marcus asked. "Maybe. I have 4 months left on my deployment. After that, I'm thinking about what comes next. Working with veterans, actually helping them instead of just sending them into combat, that appeals to me." Rosa watched from the doorway, her heart full. Her daughter and her employer, planning a future that included her. A future built on purpose instead of survival. At noon, Detective Williams called to tell them Patricia's trial date had been set for 6 months out. The prosecution was confident. The evidence was overwhelming. Justice, it seemed, was actually going to happen. At 3 p.m., Marcus's research team called with the news they'd been waiting for. They'd found it. The photograph. Thomas's homecoming photo from 1973, preserved in the archives of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. A young Rosa in a yellow dress, a young Thomas in his uniform, both of them smiling on their front porch like the world was full of nothing but possibility. The restoration took 3 days. When Marcus presented it to Rosa, professionally framed and matted, she cried so hard she couldn't speak. The smile was the same. The love was the same. The hope was the same. "Thank you," she finally managed. "Thank you for giving him back to me." "You never lost him," Marcus said gently. "Patricia destroyed a copy, but she couldn't destroy what he meant to you. No one can." The photograph became the centerpiece of the Foundation's office when it officially opened 2 weeks later. The Rosa Mae Jenkins Veterans Family Resource Center, housed in a renovated building downtown, with Carmen as operations manager, Michelle as outreach coordinator, and Rosa as the director who'd lived the mission. The opening ceremony drew hundreds, veterans and their families, homeless advocates, city officials, and media from across the country. Even Sharon Fletcher from a PS came, bringing a donation from her own pocket. But the moment that mattered most came when a young woman approached Rosa, holding the hand of a small child. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm sorry to bother you, but I saw your story on TV. My husband died in Iraq 2 years ago. I've been living out of my car with my daughter for 3 months. I didn't know where to turn until I saw you, until I saw someone who understood." Rosa took the woman's hands in hers. "You're not alone anymore. Come inside. Let's get you help." As Rosa led the woman and her daughter into the center, past Thomas's photograph, past the mission statement that read, "Dignity, support, hope," she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of having no problems. The peace of knowing she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do.
Patricia Whitmore was convicted on all counts 4 months later. She served 18 months in prison, lost her social standing, and divorced Richard Whitmore, who faced his own legal troubles. But Rosa barely paid attention to the news. She was too busy helping families rebuild their lives. A year after that terrible day on Patricia's doorstep, Rosa stood in the Foundation's conference room presenting the annual report to the board. They'd helped 230 families find housing, placed 117 veterans in jobs, reunited 43 children with parents who'd been separated by homelessness. The numbers were impressive, but the stories were what mattered. The single mother who now had her own apartment and a nursing degree. The veteran with PTSD who'd found treatment and purpose. The elderly widow who'd found community after years of isolation. These were Rosa's victories. These were what mattered. After the presentation, Marcus found her standing in front of Thomas's photograph, as she often did when she needed to think. "He'd be proud of you," Marcus said. "I hope so. I hope he knows that his sacrifice wasn't for nothing, that it led to this." "I think he knows." Michelle appeared in the doorway. "Mom, there's a family here. Recent eviction. 3 kids. They saw your story and drove here from Birmingham. Can you talk to them?" Rosa straightened her shoulders, smoothed her dress, and smiled. "Of course. Let's go help them." As she walked toward the lobby where another family waited, another set of desperate eyes hoping for help, Rosa thought about the journey that had brought her here. The loss, the pain, the cruelty, the kindness, the fight. She thought about Patricia's heel on that photograph, trying to destroy what couldn't be destroyed. She thought about Marcus's hand catching her when she fell. She thought about the choice to stand up instead of stay down. And she thought about Thomas's voice in her memory, saying what he'd always said when things got hard. "You're tougher than you think, baby. You always have been." He was right. She was tough. Not because she didn't feel pain, but because she transformed pain into purpose. Not because she didn't fall, but because she got back up. Not because she didn't need help, but because she accepted it with grace and paid it forward with interest. The family in the lobby stood when they saw her, hope and fear warring on their faces. The mother clutched her children close, protecting them from a world that had failed them. Rosa knew that feeling. She'd lived that feeling, but she also knew what came next. "Welcome," Rosa said, extending her hand to the mother. "You're safe here. You're seen here. And we're going to help you rebuild. I promise." Because that's what survivors do. They survive. They heal. They help others survive and heal. And they never, ever let cruelty have the last word.